Welcome everyone to our September Arcadia Book Club, a discussion of Mercury Pictures Presents by Anthony Marra. And I will say this is the book club book I have laughed out loud the most at. I read it in paper, but I had it on my phone too. And I would be walking down the street just laughing out loud. And I'm sure people thought I was crazier than usual, but already.
Remember, you live in a small town. People already knew that about you.
Yeah. But yes, I loved Artie and Maria's repartee and their relationship. I thought it was fabulous.
Okay. I have a preview copy, so I hope pages are right. But well, the thing I love about him as a writer, period, is his mixture of the comic and the tragic in all three of his books, which I read the Tsar of Love and Techno first, and then I read his novel from the previous 2 years prior. But he, like me, grew up in a family where I don't know how many of you saw this article about him. Sarah Lyle did an interview with him in the New York Times about a month and a half ago, called "The Sunny Outlook is Important During the Somber Times." But one of the first quote in it from him is, "I grew up among people who made jokes at serious moments. Comedy has always felt like the most eloquent expression of absurdity, a natural reaction to darkness." And I just think that he's startlingly good, particularly, he's only 37 years old. Oh, wow. And he's written these 3 massive books now. But I think he's particularly good at leavening putting humor in as many places as he can, and not gratuitous humor, but I mean really character-driven humor. I think that's, his love of people is really extraordinary. I mean, even the tiniest characters in this book get, something that makes them real. It's just, and some of the stories, even though they're kind of smallish in the book, just stay with you forever. I mean, Anna Weber, the woman who built the model, the very, very, very beginning of the book, there's this model mentioned of the studio, and you're kind of thinking, what's this about? And then you get every now and then, every 100 pages, you get another 8 pages of Anna Weber's story, and then the way she ends her life is just unbelievable, but it's so rich, and you care about them all. Okay, that's I don't need to talk about anything. I'm going to let you guys talk. So talk. Who wants to talk? Hey, speaking of Mary Pat, she doesn't have a body or a head tonight, Larry. She doesn't seem to be here. What did you do to Mary Pat, Larry? Okay.
She has a board meeting tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Unexpectedly.
She intended to be here, but then this board meeting came up.
What kind of board is she on?
She's the president of Writers Cedars Board.
Oh, okay. I heard all about that. That sounded fascinating. All right, James, I'll start.
Okay.
It seems like we've read a lot of books, well, maybe the last couple, where things jumped around. And I usually, that doesn't bother me, but what struck me in the first half of the book, the tone of the Hollywood stuff was so different from what was going on in Italy. You're laughing, it's funny, and then all of a sudden you're in this Italian town, which was like one of the worst places that I've ever virtually visited. And I was like, this seems too out of whack. But by the end of the book, it was amazing to me how it all came together in such a brilliant way. Because in the first half, I was like, I don't know where this is going. And I don't know if this guy's going to be able to pull it off.
Yeah, no, I get that. I understand. Yeah, it really is like watching, you know, a movie or sort of intercut movies between, you know, Martin Scorsese and the Marx Brothers or something. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very disconcerting. I agree. But I agree, Larry. I mean, I think he's like some other writers who write these kinds of books. I think they just have enough faith in themselves and in the readership to say, yes, I think some people will get nervous about this, or they'll keep questioning what the hell's going on. But then, you know, it's the slowly blending the two, and then it lands. And I think it's because I think the humor really helps you accept Giuseppe's story. But yeah, I agree. I think it's very risky to write like that, because, you know, some people just close the book after 100 pages and say, to hell with it. I don't get this. Did other people feel that? Or Adele? Yeah.
Well, I guess I was more that all the characters were more of a facade, and I was just getting more and more interested. Well, how is he going to do all this? So for me, it was, I wanted to finish it to know the mystery. I wanted to finish to know all those small parts. You know, the floorboard with the prisoner of war, and the Italian sisters. That was where, Nancy, I was hysterical. I mean, I could just see that, and, you know, someone making a movie with those 4 old Italian dressed in black ants. So
let me interrupt for 1 second. Those women are based on Anthony Marra's aunts.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
Yeah, the last of whom died in 2015. She was 98, and he says about her, she lived to 98 and hated every second of it.
Yeah, that's one of those laugh out loud, you know, kinds of things. So getting to know all the characters, what was the energy for me behind the book?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Diane, I thought you had. Oh, you're
yeah, I'm here. I did say I did not finish the book. I got a little bored with it for a while, and I had to put it aside, which was probably more a function of where my head is at right now. And then I picked it up again today, but I still only got to page 177. But
nothing much happens after that. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Well, I did, and I know you hate this, but I did kind of skim to the end to kind of see what happened. But to Nancy's point about the laugh out loud, and on page 55, when one of the aunts gets married, and he's talking about, and having been raised Catholic, this was even funnier, I think, to me, when he talked about, and I probably haven't been to confession in like 50 years, but when he talked about how his aunt used to make up sins in the confessional.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding? I did that all the time.
Phony affairs and all this stuff, and how the priest was looking at all these people now in his congregation and just turning green about, you know, where those lips that were on the chalice had been. I just about fell off the sofa. I never thought to do that, but now if I ever go to confession again, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Well, I remember going to confession all the time and thinking, this priest is going to be on to me. I say the same exact thing every 2 weeks. So I'm just going to shake it up and say something, you know, and then it was really fun. You know, you just kind of, and you sort of hear him go, you know, but I was young, you know, you do that. Yeah. Those women were just, what does the one say to the young girl? You've got your whole life ahead of you. Poor, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I think some parts of his family still run a restaurant in San Francisco, and a very, very conventional, old-fashioned Italian restaurant. So, yeah.
He does mention that in the acknowledgments.
Oh, okay.
He talks about how you can get that dish that they ordered
Right. Yeah,
when they were at lunch. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Connie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I'm just going to admit that I'm on page 361. I've just ran out of time, but what just happened for me is the fact that Ned is basically offering the job to Maria. Is it Maria? Yes. And he's blackmailing her, remember? Because by vendetta or what, I can't remember that woman's name. Anyway, I have to tell you, and I apologize for joining late, and if this has already been brought up, but there were so many laugh out loud times in this book, as well as heartbreaking things. But Artie, he's Carl Reiner on the Dick Van Dyke Show. Did you all talk about this already?
No.
There's an episode on Dick Van Dyke, on the old Dick Van Dyke Show, where Carl Reiner, and remember, he's the boss, right?
Yeah.
And he has toupees, and he probably has 6 toupees. And Laura the wife has blurted out on a TV show about, I forgot what his name is on the show, but Carl Reiner has all these toupees, and he thought it was all secret. Anyway, Artie is Carl Reiner on the Dick Van Dyke Show. I loved Carl, and now I just see he's a millionaire times 3, but that's where I'm at. Heartbreaking things such as the part where the black young soldier is not served in the little luncheonette in Utah, and now serves 60 years in prison. You recall that, right? And that name, I actually went online today. Is that a real person? And I did not find it was a real person, but that story could be true 100 times. No,
I think it probably is. I wouldn't be surprised if it's true.
Yeah.
He's a remarkable researcher, by the way. And remember, I mentioned this book, and I think Diane ordered it. But if your City of Nets has a different cover now, this is the original book, but it's a portrait of Hollywood in the 40s. It is an absolutely extraordinary book, and a lot of the stuff that Marra writes about in those years of the war, and he says it at the end of it that he had read that book very carefully, and it's a brilliant book, because it does combine all of these stories of people that were real, and you think this couldn't have happened, and then it did. Nope.
But Bonnie, keep reading, because Louis' story doesn't end at the diner.
Right. Well, where I stopped was he's in Germany, and the woman says, "Come on in," in her soaked slippers. Yeah. So, and that's why I thought, could that really be real though? Trying to research that name, and it wasn't. But yeah, I'll be finishing the book. Spoiler alert or not, I don't care. I really, again, James, enjoyed the book. I have to be honest and say, not the easiest read. The guy writes really long sentences that I had to reread a number of times sometimes, because he's quite descriptive. But I loved being in that, it's like watching a 1940s movie too. The dialogue, the rat-tat.
Yeah, it's kind of, the dialogue between Artie and Maria is kind of like, His Girl Friday, or, one of those really, or It Happened One Night. They just go like mad, and they just, which is great. They don't wait around for the laughs. They just bang it out. It's really great. The other introductory comments. Oh, Larry again. You're monopolizing.
Well, sorry. First of all, Bonnie, I just saw that episode of Dick Van Dyke. I think it was broadcast recently in the last year with some special thing. So that is a great connection there. I was just going to say, as a Jew who's married to a Catholic, there were a lot of good Jewish Catholic comments, like on page 5, the Grand Inquisitor over there was Joseph Breen, a blue-nosed so distraughtfully Catholic, he'd once boulderized a Jesus biopic for sticking too close to the source material. Apparently, a foreign-born Jew advocating redistribution smacked of Bolshevism to Breen. And then on page 52, Giannini was technically Gentile, but in California, an Italian was just a Jew with the wrong Sabbath. And he's got a lot of great things like that. But I just wanted to say, I knew all about the Japanese internment camps, but I did not know that the Italian and German Americans had to register and were basically in a virtual prison also. So that was really fascinating, because I don't think that's something that gets taught too much in the history of World War II.
Right. I don't know about you, Larry. I mean, I started out in life as a high school history teacher, and sometimes we weren't encouraged to talk about the bad things that the country did. And
unlike today, when that's happening all over the country.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, there's just a minute. Let me look at my notes, because there's something. Somebody tell me where the letter, the paragraph of the letter from her dad, I have it marked here somewhere, about moving around. Do you remember that?
That was very poignant, how he tied the two together, about how Maria couldn't move around because she had to register just like her father.
Right.
Amazing job.
Yeah. Well, somebody else talk while I find that letter, because it's really right.
And wasn't that clever about the letter? How, how her father kept his snippets and she had hers, and it tied up.
I love the way the letter came together. I guess one thing that struck me about all these characters was each person in his or her own way seemed so lonely to me, even as they were interacting or, engaging in repartee, like Maria and Artie. They seemed very lonely to me. And so despite the humor in the book, it had a kind of a poignant undertow, I guess, that was always there.
I completely agree. I think that's what makes it really a beautiful book, is that.
I mean, I confess that I found it frustrating at first. I mean, he has such he seems to have such a quick mind, and he will move from some incredible detail to some much more discursive kind of way of writing. And I had to get used to his style. I tried to read A Constellation of Vital Phenomena several times, and I couldn't read it. So I was worried about this book, but it's a very different book, I think, much different. Yeah. There were some things I didn't know too, like those facsimile villages. I had no idea they did that. Isn't that
amazing? God.
Yeah.
Well, and talk about a payoff. I mean, the fact that she just allows herself to be exploded in the village that she built was just, by the end, it's just, oh, I'm sorry, that was a spoiler. Oh,
no, I read that part.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. I'm determined to find this paragraph. Oh, I hate this when I do this. Ah, got it. Okay, so There was one passage she had returned to again and again in the months since the enemy alien prohibitions were introduced. And then her dad writes, I still haven't grown accustomed to the sensation of being both marooned and landlocked. The San Lorenzo Confino colony is without fences, barbed wire, or locks, but the borders are as clear in my mind as if the very ocean were lapping against the streets and intersections that encircle my little island. Sometimes I watch the locals cross through the unmarked threshold where the Confino colony ends and think, how have they learned to walk through walls? You can't know the pleasure your descriptions of traipsing around Los Angeles have brought me. For the length of a letter, I can walk through walls too. Jeez.
It's such a great last sentence.
Yeah.
It just cinches that whole paragraph.
Other things that you liked or didn't like, or frustrated you, or delighted you, or bored you to tears?
I just wanted to say, to let people know that in the late 60s, 1969, as a matter of fact, my husband served on the Army base in Dugway, Utah, and they are still doing strange things. Where at that time, in the late 60s, they were still doing strange things because one of his main assignments was to pick up all of these dead sheep that had been killed with chemicals that they were experimenting with in terms of chemical warfare. Well, that's our supposition. Why else would they be experimenting with these chemicals? We don't know for sure, but we think that's what happened. So it's still kind of but it was so strange because I never hear anything about Dugway, Utah. And then I'm reading this book and here's that whole thing about things going on there that the government has a hand in. So,
well, and a lot of people in Utah, of course, they're known as the downwind generation because of the nuclear tests in Nevada. Mm-hmm. 50s, I don't know whether you've ever read Terry Tempest Williams' great book Refuge, but in her family had lived in a certain part of Utah for 7 generations, and for 6 generations there was no cancer in the family, and in the 7th generation there were six people who died of cancer, including her mother. Yeah, and they, all of them after in the late 50s and early 60s. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's the one. I don't know. I'm sure you've all, or many of you, have driven through that part of the world, and I lived in the West for a very long time. Yeah, there are just miles and miles and miles and miles and miles where, frankly, anything could be happening because no one would ever know. Mm-hmm. And that's both good and bad, obviously. Other thoughts? Favorite passages? What?
Well, I want to add, I'm liking how the author drops characters along the way, and it feels really natural. Whether it's Anna, right? Or Maria's boyfriend, Lou, Tony Lou, I don't remember his first name.
Eddie.
Yeah. How, unless they pop up and I'm later at the very end of the book, but anyway, he does it, and it's very natural in a sense, because I don't know how authors do that, but it still flowed. It made sense, I thought, in the book.
Yeah, and I thought it's something that when I was going through notes and things today, I was reminded of that sort of hilarious way that he uses Bela Lugosi in the book, so that even the impersonators think that Bela Lugosi is a Bela Lugosi impersonator.
You mean Bruce?
Yeah, exactly. It's so great. And then that terrific scene, though, between Bela Lugosi and Eddie, at the end of the book, it's just, man, you just get these payoffs. But yeah, Bela Lugosi. Of course, I grew up you know, I'm in my 70s, so Bela Lugosi was one of those guys who scared me all the time when I was watching movies on television late at night. When my parents had gone to bed, which was the only time I was allowed to watch television, as if they were on vacation or asleep. Yeah, it was.
Well, and isn't those two characters, and I think, was it Allison or Diane? One of you spoke about people being lonely throughout.
Yeah, Allison.
Those two, I mean, the interactions between them, you really get the sense of that. Yeah. You know, and to have Eddie just leaves his car for Bella, and Bella's, you know, the caricature of himself. And the whole, wasn't that interesting about having to work on your dialect? Because you don't have the Chinese or Asian dialect because you weren't born here. But yet, you know, that whole dilemma that must happen all the time for folks.
Yeah, sure.
And for Bella himself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm married to someone who was born in Hong Kong, and her parents were from mainland China. And you know, you speak either Mandarin or Cantonese, but, you know, frequently, a few times since I've known Helen, she was up for certain parts in things where she had to speak lines in Mandarin, and she had to call her mother to say, how do I say this? Because she only speaks Cantonese. You know, so yeah, but then yeah, when you add the layer that they were adding of the accent of what somebody sounds like, it's really something. You know. Other thoughts? All right, I'm going to read something then. If you're also polite and quiet, kind of annoying. Do you remember the sequence? Well, in my copy, which is probably a page off from yours, it's on page 225 and 226. It's when Maria is researching things about propaganda films, and she's watching the Leni Riefenstahl, you know, the most famous, you know, piece of propaganda in the 20th century, Triumph of the Will. But what I loved about it, and I wrote in the book at a certain point, Springtime for Hitler, because this is how Marra writes it. Watching the party faithful march through Nuremberg rally grounds with the rigorous geometry of Busby Berkeley chorus lines, Maria was unnerved by her inability to dismiss Riefenstahl as a mere propagandist. What troubled Maria, as much as anything else, was the spectacle of a filmmaker pressing her undeniably singular vision into the service of a picture that denied the singularity of individual experience. Riefenstahl marshaled hundreds of thousands of participants without betraying the slightest curiosity in human beings. The resulting picture was a feat of engineering as precise and soulless as a munitions production line. And then if you skip a paragraph, then this next paragraph is the one that really made me think of Springtime for Hitler. She started the movie reel from the beginning, but played it at a double speed. At this faster tempo, the procession of stormtroopers transformed from an invincible army of death into a prancing troop with only the love of Oompa in their hearts. Their legs shot up and down in brisk showgirl strides. They progressed with a sort of spirited unwieldiness, as if attached by strings to the hands of an eager but inexperienced puppeteer. Simply changing the projection speed and musical accompaniment subverted what Riefenstahl needed 30 cameras and a cast of thousands to achieve. Riefenstahl couldn't be outdone, Maria decided, only undone. Mm. And it's that, but that's, I mean, the role of propaganda in the book in all of its weird forms is really one of the themes that I love most. because we live for better and frequently for worse, in a time when people are constantly manipulating information and constantly influencing people by telling half-truths or repeating half-truths, or dazzling you with a half-truth that's beautifully produced. And I just thought he did a very deft job of kind of making the chime go off in your brain about the present moment while reading about the past.
I wonder if he actually speeded up the film to himself. Did he just imagine that? It's just interesting to think about.
It is, but all I can say is, having seen that movie a couple of times, the moment I read it, you think that's exactly right, because then you really are in Mel Brooks land. You're just don't you be a little smarty, come and join the Nazi party. I mean, it's that sort of crazy stuff of just elevating something slightly larger, which of course that's Hollywood's job too, is making things that are not quite real seem real. What other sorry, I just saw one of the great lines by one of the ants. My husband, Mimi said from the kitchen, a 2-word verdict: slur, regret. I warned her, Layla said, never buy a cat in a bag. I said, but does she listen? Oh my God. Really good.
I wonder if we counted, like, are there different movie tropes or different relationships, like the Kurt and Vincent are kind of like the buddy, on a trip movie trope, those two. And, even as horrible as they are taking video of the aftermath of battle scenes, but then, Kurt is off stealing stuff and always waiting for the MPs to come get him. And that scene where the actress / prostitute comes back to life, and then they all the Italians think perhaps they are also miracles. So there's the buddy movie trope. There's the Maria Artie with their 40s Katharine Hepburn kind of thing going on. I don't know. Did anybody else see things like that?
What about the mobster that had organized that elaborate escape in Italy, and then with the whole thing about how easy it was going to be to steal one of the Mercedes, and the fascist guy runs after him in the nude and kills him?
Yeah.
That was a great scene, and I was shocked that the mother didn't give him away at the end.
Yeah, well, that was really moving, I thought. Yeah, I agree with you, Larry. That was shocking.
Because you're like, after all this, he's gonna be exposed, and then the way it ends with him sending that letter that he wasn't going to send, I thought that was really brilliant.
I thought
you kind of wanted to know what happened.
Yeah, I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah, that's the very last image.
Right.
Oh gosh. Wow.
Vincent, I found to be one of the most interesting characters, just because of his complexity. I mean, his goodness, his badness, his, and I agree, Larry, that was totally unexpected at the end, that the mother didn't blow that, and the letter was so beautiful.
Well, yeah, and I think both, and then Vincent and Maria were bound inextricably by what they were carrying, the decisions that they had made, that had so profoundly affected both their own lives, but much more deeply other people's lives, and in one case, the same person's life. And I just had the book open to a certain place when Vincent is telling Anna the story, Anna Weber, who he really is, and the story of his life, and he's trying to go on, and she doesn't want to hear it, and he says he told her not the whole story. He hadn't told her his real name, hadn't even introduced himself, but she could see where it was going, and she said, "Stop telling me this." But if he stopped now, he would never find his way back to where atonement begins. And that whole sense of, I mean, sometimes we do things and it really doesn't even, we know that they're bad when we do them, but they get worse as life goes on rather than dissipating. And you have to think, what can I do to atone for this? What can I do to, I just finished reading Lynn McEwen's fabulous novel, Lessons. And, some people get pissy about him, particularly in a certain time of his life where he would sort of pull the rug out from under you at the end of a book and change everything. Most principally Atonement, the book Atonement. And I remember having an argument once with a guy who was bitching about that. And I said to him, the name of the book is Atonement. Figure it out. I mean, why are you mad when the book's about atoning, when that's the name of the book? It's just, but atonement is such a potent idea. And it's, there are just certain things that in this book that just get into you and you can't get rid of them, and that she did that thing about her dad to her dad. And that she says over and over in the book, he can't, what I did was unforgivable. And what do I do with the fact that it's unforgivable? Larry, did you?
Yeah, it seems like a majority of the characters in this book had horrible guilt about something and all had gone through some kind of inexplicable trauma. And I can't ever remember a book where so many characters were haunted by one incident in their lives for like the rest of their lives. And I loved when Maria you thought for sure she was going to work for Ned for the money and the blackmail. But then when she's negotiating with Artie to get a percentage, and she was like, she finally understood why her mother bartered with the fishmonger, and she had never been more her mother's daughter than in that moment. The way that all came around after she hated her mother for half the book, and it really just was remarkable. And I loved Eddie Lou walking away from that blockbuster movie because he finally reached his breaking point. And it's just, I don't think there's one character in the book that didn't have some kind of arc like that. And they were all over the place, but again, it all came together in the end.
Yeah.
Well, another example is with Eddie and Maria themselves as a couple. And they had never been he writes how they'd never been so in love until that very end when they make that conscious decision, right? And how often do you see that? Not so much in writing.
Right. Larry, here's this is a quote from early in the book. I have so many tags in this book, it's hard to find everything. But Annuzetta, the mother, marveled at her daughter's folly. The better you know someone, the less understandable they become. That's what intimacy is. Not a threshold of knowledge, but a capitulation to ignorance, an acceptance that another person is made as bewildered and ungovernable by her life as you are by yours. And then the daughter, Maria, says, "Please, Mama, help me." And the mother's response is, "I don't know how." Oof. And then, you know, some joke happens, and then, you know,
no, that's exactly a part that I was thinking of. But I will say I will never be able to think of Midsummer Night's Dream again without thinking of A Summertime Snooze. That was a great line.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it was funny that Eddie was the most literate character of the whole book. He was really the only one who really knew Shakespeare and Chekhov and everything else for all the good it did him.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And then that's what he says. He can't, you know, when people cast you in a movie, they're telling you who you are. And that, you know, that really is a sad truism, particularly then, you know, that no one would cast him as Hamlet. I mean, it just wouldn't happen.
Well, and now people are complaining that the new Power of the Rings and House of Dragon, oh my goodness, they let people of color play some of these roles, and people are like, oh, that is such a sacrilege. It's just, we haven't made very much progress.
What's even funnier, Larry, is the outrage over the Little Mermaid being a person of color. It's a mermaid.
Yeah, well,
who knows what color a mermaid is? She could be blue, green, purple, yellow.
Trevor
outrage.
Trevor Noah on The Daily Show did a great 5-minute thing on that where he said, she's got the red hair, she's got the tail, she's a mermaid. And did you know that Finding Nemo is an African-American story because it's about a girl with an absent father that she's trying to find. That's the African-American story. Wow. But it's sad, but yeah.
Wow.
James, do you have anything to say about 2 books in a row with an Asian male character yearning to play Macbeth?
Yeah, I know. Only that it's true. Although remember who started American Players Theater? Randall Duck Kim.
I was just giving you the chance to go off on how much you dislike Macbeth.
Oh, I know, that's true. That's right. Right. Yeah. I forgot. Thank you. I could have hit that out of the park had my brain been thinking appropriately. Yeah, Macbeth.
What's your favorite?
Boring. God, what a horrible play. Other things? Other thoughts?
So, speaking of Ian McEwan, anything you want to tell us about that, James?
Monday I was in New York and listened to Ian McEwan be interviewed by an equally, not quite equally good writer, but an extremely good writer, Claire Massoud. But I only say that because I find Ian McEwan to be particularly potent. But yeah, it was quite interesting, and he was just the way you'd expect him to be. He was clear and self-deprecating a little, but quite smart, but controlled all the time. The day before this was at the 92nd Street Y, and the day before I'd seen Tom Stoppard interviewed there, and who's now 85. He's, as I said in that thing I wrote last week about the McEwan book, Ian McEwan and I were born in the same week, and Stoppard was born in that same week too, but 11 years earlier than both of us. But yeah, that was really, it was thrilling to see them both. But but I think one of the things, Anthony Marra is probably a much showier writer than McEwan, but he has that gift that Stoppard has that almost no other playwright has, which is the ability to write absolutely foolproof jokes, and knows where to put them in a book or in a play. And I think Anthony Marra has just had an unerring sense of when you needed a joke. And they learned that probably from Shakespeare all those years ago, because Shakespeare was very deft at putting jokes into even the biggest tragedies, right when you needed a little breath before the worst things happened. But yeah, that was a kind of thrilling 2 days, since they're two people who are very, very important in my kind of, I don't know, Stoppard's probably the single most important influence in my whole life, I would guess, at least for the part of my life that has to do with theater.
James, what kind of shape is he in at 85?
Well, I had to cut him some slack, because he's here to do, they're rehearsing Leopoldstadt, and they're going to open it in 2 weeks. And so and in fact, he said very early in the interview, well, the interview started a half hour late because there were so many people trying to get, trying to get in. So I think he was probably flummoxed by that. He's very, very, he's very openly private. I mean, he doesn't mind sharing all sorts of things, but he's very careful about how he shares things. And I think these kind of events that were so big and public made him particularly cautious. And then Larry, when he got up, he sat for an hour and 10 minutes with his legs, crossed, like that, tightly crossed. And I was thinking to myself at one point, oh God, when I sit like that for that long, when I get up, I fall over. And sure enough, he almost did. He got up and he fell, sort of collapsed into the interviewers. But they were both, it was really quite moving. And he was, you can see it if you go to the 92nd Street website. I think you can watch it now.
Those were taped, those interviews.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that McEwan, I assume it was, but yeah. Although the Stoppard one was, stop it. Excuse me, Hannah, stop. Come here. Hey, we're almost done. It's almost time for food. Come here. The Stoppard.
She wants to be interviewed. She wants to be interviewed, James.
Stoppard event was the single most heavily attended event in the history of the 92nd Street Y, between when you add in all the people who were lined up, online to see it. But there were over 1,000 people. We got out of the cab at 20 after 4, and we thought, oh my God, we're almost late. And I got out of the cab, it's at Lexington and 92nd. And I thought, look at this line. And the line went from the door of the YMCA all the way down to the end of the block at 91st Street. And I thought, holy crap. Well, we get to 91st Street. The line went from Lexington all the way to 3rd Avenue, which is a massively long block. There must have been 600 people in the line just waiting to get in. So the thing started late, Larry. I think he told us early on that the director had called him right before they went on, and he wanted to cut a particular thing in the play. And so his brain was thinking about that. And, but he's still, he's unbelievable. And just funny and sweet. And I have one more little thing from the book that I wanted to read. It's at the very, very end. So, Bonnie, you better not listen to this. Or in fact, half of you better not listen. No,
yeah, please go ahead.
But it's she's looking around. Maria's in Picone photography. And she's looking for stuff, trying to find out what happened to her dad. And it says, nothing in Picone photography offered any indication of what had befallen Giuseppe. Aside from the pictures of Maria on the wall and the cardboard box beneath the bed, there was nothing to suggest he had ever lived there. When Maria lifted the lid off the cardboard box and saw hundreds of international mail envelopes ordered in neat rows, she felt raised out of her dread and shame and remorse into a state of unforeseen elation. It had been 9 years since she'd last received a letter from him, and for the briefest moment, she imagined these were all the letters her father hadn't sent, that each contained news she'd never heard and greetings she'd never received. That within them, she would find the answers to her every question. But no, of course not. Inside those hundreds of envelopes were the letters she had written him from Los Angeles. Her father had saved them all. This was what he left behind. All that remained of him was her. I mean, that's a pretty good paragraph. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and I appreciate that you stayed with it, because it isn't an easy book, and the tones are so wildly different. It's challenging. I agree, but good for you, and good for sticking with it. And it tells you a lot, but in a way, I mean, it informs you of lots of things, but in a way that is so easy to take in. I think that it really it's a really, really good way to learn social history. I mean, books like this, I think. And it also...
Hey, James?
Yeah.
I just wanted to put in a plug for The Plot Against America by Philip Roth, because this reminded me so much of that. For those who haven't read it, it's an alternative history where Charles Lindbergh is running for president. And the echoes of that in this book, and that whole scene where Artie goes to testify. Yeah. I had never heard of that one senator. Of course, in Wisconsin, we're very familiar with Joe McCarthy, but the fact that he went to bed the evening of December 6th, a pariah, and woke on the morning of December 7th, a prophet. That whole scene was so brilliantly done when he testified, and his fortunes turned around. But
no, I agree with you. And that senator is real.
Right. I never heard of Nye.
Yeah, as is Breen, the censor. Yeah. I had a list at one point of all of the real people in it. But it's, Nance, Rancher.
Should we talk about next month?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to do something a little different. Another historical fiction. And this book has a couple different of the shout out blurbs. Hilary Mantel's name comes up, as does Wolf Hall. Because we're coming into October, we're going to read a book about witches. So it's called The Manning Tree Witches. So neither James nor I have read this book, A.K. Blakemore, but I read many reviews as we were researching what we wanted to choose. And what people love about this book, what reviewers love about this book, is this is her first novel, but she's a poet. And so the prose and her, it's just very lyrical and beautifully written. A.K. Blakemore is the author of 2 collections of poetry. She's also translated the work of Szechuanese poet Yu Yo-Yo. Her poetry and prose writing have been widely published and anthologized and appearing in the London Review of Books, Poetry, the Poetry Review, and the White Review, among other publications. So this just seems like kind of a fun book for us to be in the spirit of Halloween, set in 1643. And
it's fairly close to The Crucible, the Arthur Miller play, which was 1692, of witchcraft in Salem, Massachusetts. So
this one is set in England, 1643. The men are off at war. The women are doing just fine, living their lives until this one dude comes to town and has to rile things up. So that's this book. So we'll meet on October 19th. That would be the third Wednesday of October.
Okay, Nancy and James, I mean, I never thought I'd read a book about three young people who write video games, and I loved that book. And I don't read books about witches, so I'm excited to read this one.
Yeah, no, I've read lots and lots of great stuff about it, but I haven't had time to read it yet. I did want to just point out a couple of things. I just finished reading Kate Atkinson's book, which I'm going to write about next week, called with probably the single worst title in the history of mankind, Shrines of Gaiety. I have no idea what it means, even though I've read the book. But it's very, very good book. I'll give another plug for Ian's book, Lessons. It's an it's for him, it's an unusual book because it's personal. It's a lot of the stuff in it is about what happened in his own family. But it's a brilliant long novel about the last 70 years. Starting as soon as we hang up the phone, well, actually, I'm going to do my elliptical, but after that, Ducks by Kate Beaton, which is a graphic novel, a graphic memoir about 2 years that she spent in the oil sands business out in Calgary. It's just, everybody's raving about this book, so I can't wait to take that on. And give one more plug to the book that I wrote about this week, Stay True, by Hua Su. It's such a beautiful book. There's 2 paragraphs. I was with my friend Melanie in New York on Monday, and we were editing the final version that I was doing, and then I read her these 3 paragraphs in the book, and I said, I really thought for a minute of just having the newsletter be, you're not going to want to read a book like this about the Taiwanese American immigrant who goes to Berkeley and meets another guy, and they have this wonderful platonic friendship and blah blah blah. And then I was just going to quote this one page from the book and say, if this doesn't make you want to read the book, then don't read it. But I have a strong feeling that almost anybody who read, he's just a beautiful, beautiful writer. He's in his 40s, and this thing that changed the course of his thinking about himself in college stayed with him for many years, and he tried to make sense of it, and he's made, I think, really beautiful sense of it. So it's just a terrific book, and it's short. You could read it in a couple of days. I'm not advocating you buying it. I'm just simply saying it's a book that'll stay with you for a long time. We were going to ask that, right, Nance, about So Long, See You Tomorrow?
Oh, right. So William Maxwell, So Long, See You Tomorrow. That's the book that we're going to read in January for our classic month. And has anybody else read that book already?
What's the title?
So Long, See You Tomorrow, William Maxwell. Oh, okay.
Say it again.
So Long, See You Tomorrow, William Maxwell.
But it's wonderful. I mean, it's well worth reading again.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yep.
What's it about?
None of your business, Larry.
Read it in January.
Yeah, it'll be in January. But no, it's about a murder. That's about as glib and silly as I could be about this book. It's really I really do think it's one of the 25 or 30 novels of the 20th century that everybody should read. I mean, it's that good. But it's about a friendship between 2 boys in a small town in Illinois in the around 1925, I think. And I've read it many times over the years. But it's written from a distance of, later in life, this man looking back at decisions he made and about what happened in this moment in this small town. Years ago, I was with some friends for a couple of weeks. It was the first time I hadn't worked in the summer directing a play in many, many years. And so some friends suggested renting a house in Italy, and I went. I'd never done anything like that in my life. And my girlfriend had to stay here. And I called her one night, and she was very upset. And I said, "Why are you so upset?" And she said, "Because I was walking to my apartment on Wellington, and a guy jumped out and knocked me over this little wall, this little fence, and I fell down, and he grabbed my purse and ran away." And I said, "Oh my God, that's horrible. I mean, how can I help?" And she said, "Oh, I had a couple of bruises." And she said, "Mostly I was stupid because I was talking on my phone." And then she started to cry. And I said, "Rachel, what's the problem? Why are you so upset?" And she said, "Because your first edition of So Long, See You Tomorrow was in my purse."
Oh.
And I said, "That's okay. There'll be others. I'll find one." You know? But I thought of that this afternoon when Nancy and I were talking about it. Terry, are you waving goodbye, or you have a comment? Oh, I don't know what that means. Okay. Scary.
She put a note in the chat.
Oh, she did. Oh, okay. Is that what that means? I don't
Well,
know.
no, I think it meant she was raising her hand, but then she had to go. So
That's too bad. I blathered on. That's fine.
She just wanted us to know that she hasn't read the book. I believe she's talking about Mercury Pictures, but will now.
Okay.
She's just listening.
Yeah, and we just brought it up tonight because we'd made the decision, but if all of you had read it, we thought, well, maybe we won't do that. But it is a book that's worth reading more than once, that's for sure. And it's short, so that's kind of nice in the winter. Okay, anything else that?
Yeah, so we'll do Manning Tree Witches. November, we'll have to make a decision. December, we can do everybody share their favorite of the year. And then January, we'll do So Long, See You Tomorrow.
And we do have, we ordered some copies of So Long, See You Tomorrow, so we have plenty in stock. So
we're way ahead on that one.
Yeah, very uncharacteristic of us.